Hi, man. He's dead.
Well, that's a problem. Um, I don't know, man.
Do you have anyone you can call? Anything like that?
I might have a guy. I don't know if he's gonna have anything, but I know for sure he loves Star Wars and he hates the prequels, and he pays his taxes. So,
Make a call.
alright.
I guess it's just struggle through Attack of the Clones.
Okay. Let me see if he wants to
Alright,
pop in for some thoughts
let's
after
do it.
that.
Oh, hey, Soren.
Oh, hey.
You wouldn't happen to know where I can get a copy of the original theatrical Star Wars movies, would you? I looked on Amazon, eBay. It's not pretty. They're either sold out or they're just gone.
Right.
You know, like
right.
they
Or
just
they
don't.
charge you a lot of money for it because they know they have one of the original editions.
Yeah, so that's kind of shitty, to be honest. But I still feel better about not being able to find those than after watching Attack of the Clones, if I'm being honest. I just finished talking about Phantom Menace with Richard from Audiences Everywhere and fade2.blogspot.com. So now I'm here talking to you, Soren Hough from Moviefail, and if you wanted to plug your Twitter at some point, that'd be okay too. I don't know for what for. This is just a normal conversation, of course.
Of course.
Yes. This is a bad movie, like just through and through. I know there's people who are defenders of the prequels, and I will defend their right to enjoy the prequels. I am not one of these people, and this movie is like the Bible of why not, because nothing in this movie works. The action isn't exciting. George Lucas has claimed it as more of a romance movie than a space opera movie, but it's just a bad romance movie if that's the way he wants to position it. What are your feelings on Attack of the Clones?
Well, you know, it's funny. I just rewatched it recently too, coincidentally.
Wow, that's a crazy coincidence.
It is strange. It really is. You know, I was not expecting. I watched this in full quality, you know, HD. So I gave it its due. But okay, well, let me put it this way. Before watching this movie, I was building an entertainment center. You know, I got the parts and I was doing that instead of watching intentionally because I was trying to put off the inevitable. And so I was not anticipating this at all. Then I started watching the movie, and I haven't seen it in many, many years. I should also preface that. I just remember liking it somewhat as a child, but you know, as I got older, I started remembering lots of it and thinking, oh, this is terrible. So I started watching it again, and as it's going on, I'm watching it in sort of standard quality, you know, DVD quality. And at some point I realized I should probably watch it in HD. And the thought occurred to me that perhaps I'm not hating this. As I was watching, I'm not hating this. And so I decided to start watching it in HD. Why else would I do that? If I didn't care, I'd just watch it in standard definition. I think the weirdest thing about my experience watching Attack of the Clones is that I didn't hate the entire thing. There are parts of it I think are terrible. I think there are parts of it that had potential, and there's a couple of things that actually are good all on their own. So yeah, it was not what I was expecting to say about the movie at all, but I didn't hate it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that. I'm glad that you do like this movie a little more than you thought. You didn't hate it. It. I guess would you say that's too strong of a word?
I would say like is too strong of a word, but I didn't hate it. And honestly, I will say this: it starts. I haven't seen The Phantom Menace in as long as I haven't seen Attack of the Clones, basically. So I have absolutely no frame of reference for what happened before this movie, except for my memory of The Phantom Menace. But this movie really just doesn't require any sort of preface. It just starts, and everything you need to know is delivered. But you know, it starts with this, with Obi-Wan and Anakin showing up to give Padme some protection. Obi-Wan makes some very salient comments about politicians, which couldn't be more relevant to modern politics. And it's sort of it's like they're talking and then it's cutting to other things. But as he's talking in the background, it's sort of fading out. I'm like, this is good dialogue. This is about politics and politicians, and it's highly amusing. And seeing the interplay of the Jedi and the politicians is interesting. Hayden Christensen is hands down the worst part of this movie by What amazes me is they found a terrible actor to play kid Anakin and also teenage Anakin, the completely different people, and in both cases just does not work on any level. And in this case, and this is the part that I really disliked, and I think is really the downfall of the film, is the romance, which I agree is terrible. But part of the reason it's terrible isn't the actual romance. Natalie Portman's fairly wooden, but it's how Hayden Christensen delivers his lines. It's so weird. In the beginning, he's supposed to be Padme's packing to get ready to go somewhere, and Hayden Christensen's talking to her, and he's saying completely innocuous things, but he delivers them like through his eyebrows, which Billy Connolly, in talking about how to play a villain, says if you ever want to scare someone, you look through your eyebrows when you talk to them. And he's saying things that are completely innocuous, but he's just glaring at her. He's like, I really like you, like weird. And I don't know if I guess this fault lies on George Lucas for not saying, hey, can you do that again, but way less creepy? Because, in some ways, you could totally see how he might have delivered it in a different way if he had been directed differently. But, he's not evil yet. There's no reason for him to be so sadistic in how he's delivering his lines. I don't know. That whole thing is weird. And then somehow that leads to Padme falling for him when he's, creepily touching her and glaring at her. This somehow works its magic on Padme. I don't understand it.
Yeah, that's a problem. I have a lot of TV shows have this problem too when they introduce characters that are going to be revealed to be villains later, but they'll have them acting villainous. Like you mentioned with the eyebrows thing. That's exactly the same mistake George Lucas made with what many people consider to be one of the all-time great movie villains before he's supposed to be revealed to become a villain in the prequel story. So it's a weird decision. Hayden Christensen, agreed, is terrible in this movie, and he is the weak link in this movie, in a movie that's made of rusty nails and just.
Yeah, no, the movie's not great, but I will say this: there are aspects of it that really are interesting. I was actually interested in the plot and how it progresses because I had no recollection of this whole Clone Wars thing and the droid army. It's a little random, Count Dooku's not in it, and then suddenly he's in it, and that was a whole weird thing. But it was kind of interesting seeing Jango Fett play both sides of these army shenanigans. That was kind of weird. He shows up on Geonosis after doing the whole Camino thing. It's not really clear why he's there, but that leads them into the whole droid army that's also being built, and Obi-Wan's sort of parsing this all. It's really interesting to sort of follow that. And the other thing that I think is not really appreciated is, while that story is fine, it's interjected with these, one scene on Camino that should just be one scene and edited down is 6 different, scenes interspersed with stuff that Anakin's doing with Padme. When it shouldn't be. It should just be 1 or 2 scenes just covering the basic premise of what's going on Camino. And so what could be really cool, the Clone Army, I actually think is kind of cool. Some people didn't like the idea of Boba Fett as a clone. I don't know why that is all that relevant. He's just Jango, but not. But who cares? So that doesn't bother me. The idea of the Clone Army is kind of cool. The idea that someone commissioned this army a long time ago, but nobody's really sure who did. That's kind of interesting. It's dragged out a little long, but I think it's and then it's the same with Geonosis. He gets to Geonosis, and then they keep cutting away and cutting back to him discovering what's going on in Geonosis. But if it was just Obi-Wan doing, James Bond stuff, trying to figure out what the enemy's plot is, that was kind of fun. And the last thing I'll say, just on cool parts, and by the way, the best moments for Hayden Christensen as well are when he's with Obi-Wan, because they have actually surprising chemistry that carries over into Clone Wars and the Clone Wars TV series. But for example, that whole scene on I don't even remember what planet it's on, but the bounty hunter scene.
Coruscant.
Coruscant. Yeah, I thought it was Coruscant. Yeah. So on Coruscant, they have this cool chasing, which, by the way, it seems like it was inspired. There's a lot of inspiration in this film, too, from other movies, you can tell. So this has a lot of what feels like Blade Runner going on with these big screens and all this digital, these flying cars and everything. That scene's pretty. It's not just cool, it's pretty. It goes on too long. And that's really the problem with this movie. And that's my thesis, I think, is that it needed an editor who was going to fix all of the overextension. But I don't think I think there was something to salvage there, and I think that's why there's been such a push from the fan community to edit down the prequels into something more manageable, because I think there are pieces that work even in Attack of the Clones.
You bring up interesting points, especially about the politics. I know a lot of people who really rag on the prequels say it gets bogged down in politics. I think George Lucas actually has something there. He just needed like dozens of more drafts to really like perfect it.
Absolutely. You know, I definitely think so. I feel like a lot of it's sort of first draft material in that regard. Having said that, there's not as many like, you know, I don't know, there was some honest trailers or something, council meetings about how the Phantom Menace is just council meetings. I remember there being a lot of that kind of thing in the first movie. There's really not much of that in this one. There's a lot of Obi-Wan doing investigations. Oh, by the way, I like the gladiator scene. I mean, there's cool little moments, even if they're lifted from John Carter or Blade Runner or whatever they're lifted from. They are kind of neat. And the other thing that's a common complaint about the prequels is CGI. They were like, oh, the CGI wasn't ready and it looks bad. And I would agree, it wasn't quite ready for prime time, and it does look kind of not so great. But the effects in the original movies, while we look back on them nostalgically and fondly, are terrible. Like, a lot of them are terrible. Some of them are cool. The lightsaber effects with the optical printing are really cool. The same with the laser blasts. But some of the puppets are kind of, you know, hokey, but it works and the stop motion works to some degree, although you can tell what's going on. But it's absolutely a product of its time. I think people's problem with going back and changing it to CGI is what people have a problem with, but it's cool to see something that's sort of a relic from its time period. And so it's the same with the Attack of the Clones, which, by the way, people weren't complaining about the CGI at the time, to my recollection. People were mostly content with it. And I think it'll be the same with The Force Awakens when that comes out and everyone thinks, oh, this is so good looking. And then in 10 years we go, oh, it looks so terrible. Well, of course. I mean, it's a product of 2015. In 2025, we're going to think it looks terrible. But yeah. So I didn't hate Attack of the Clones. I wasn't expecting it. But
yeah, I mean, it could be worse. I think even this one, there are worse movies people could talk about. You know, I think it's like a Spider-Man 3 situation where it's not as good as other movies. I mean, it's still bad. I'm not going to go and defend Spider-Man 3 too much.
Right.
It's not as bad as some other movies that have come out.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's such a popular part of a big franchise, that disappointment factor.
It's huge.
Yeah, and then the internet hyperbole phenomenon, I guess if we want to call it that, it'll just rag on forever, and it won't stop.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, I mean, like, again.
I've been part of it. I've written articles about how terrible The Phantom Menace is. I've written articles about how bad Attacking the Clones is. But when I really sat down to rewatch it for the first time in a long time, I haven't written those. I didn't write those recently, but when they were a bit fresher in my mind, I wrote them. And really going back, it's not that I'm not going to go like, oh, they're good movies. I think A New Hope is pretty much a perfect film. So no, this is not A New Hope in any way, shape, or form. But it's whatever. When movies like Age of Extinction exist, really, you got to give something like Attack of the Clones a break. And one thing you can say for Attack of the Clones is its existence allows for, it sets up what is explored in Clone Wars and the Clone Wars, and then eventually Rebels. This is all from this era. So, without it, we wouldn't have these really fantastic shows from Jenny Tartakovsky and Dave Filoni and all of them. So there's some value to it, I think.
I think I will end it on that note. And if anybody wanted to check out your stuff, they could check out moviefail.com and your Twitter handle, which I cannot remember off the top of my head.
Soren Hough.
Soren Hough.
SORENHOUGH. Or you can go to twitter.com/moviefailblog. Or you can go to Facebook, facebook.com/moviefail.
Yeah, just those little things. All right, thanks, man. I appreciate that. I think I needed this. I'm going to go take a walk now because I'm still a little beaten up after this movie. Again, ending it on a lighter note, but yeah, it's still kind of hard to get me through this one. So,
all right,
soul search bit.